Up first, Blake Snell, coming off one of the best seasons of his career, a Shoreline native at age 30, started all 32 games this season, 2.25 ERA and 180 innings. He struck out over 31% of his batters, and I think he's the front runner for the National League Cy Young, and he's set to be a free agent this offseason. He is a Boras guy, just to clarify. He is a Scott Boras client. However, he did grow up in Shoreline, and I think there might be some linkage there of a guy getting nostalgic and wanting to come home to his hometown team that he watched growing up and now has a chance to be part of a successful Mariners team.
Seattle royalty. Look, Blake Snell, baseball aside, he is still a Seattle guy through and through. He's a Seahawks fan. He's still a massive Washington Huskies fan. Seattle's in his blood, and he has not ever let that go. He talks about it all the time. The flip side of this is, like you mentioned, he is a Boras client. So that leads to the question of, do you think he would take any sort of hometown discount to come to Seattle?
Maybe. I'd be curious to see what his market is because he has a very interesting profile. Now, let me clarify what I mean by interesting profile. Lyle, how many outs did Blake Snell record in the 7th inning or later this season?
When you texted me this yesterday, my initial guess was 0.
It's 9. 9 outs recorded in the 7th inning or later. In 32 starts, he recorded 9 outs in the 7th inning or later. That's pretty remarkable for a guy who's probably going to get frontline starter money or pretty close to that.
So he doesn't go deep into games. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he throws a lot of pitches. Because here's what Blake Snell does. He will strike a lot of guys out. His Ks per 9 are usually in the double digits. He also walks a lot of batters.
Yeah, 13%. That's his walk rate. And that's pretty absurd walk rate. And if you think about philosophically, he's not really stylistically a Mariners pitcher. Mariners pitchers, as you saw this season, walk the fewest batters of any staff in baseball. Well, Blake Snell is the antithesis of that. He walks a ton of batters. He's not George Kirby. He's not going to go deep into starts. His stuff is really good, but it's all over the place. So my thinking here with signing Blake Snell, not only is he a hometown guy who would want to come home, but this would lead a little bit into yours, where this would be contingent on the Mariners dealing away some of their young starting pitching and putting a more proven commodity in the rotation.
Yeah, so little spoiler, we're not going to get to my list yet, but the reason we're talking about starting pitchers here is because it is a little bit of a part of a grand plan for how the Mariners could get more bats here in the lineup, and impact bats at that. So we'll get into that more a little bit later, but Blake Snell would fit into that mold. The only thing is, again, this goes back to the question of him being a Boras client, in the sense of, one, would he take a hometown discount to sign with the Mariners? Because you know he's a Seattle guy and loves the city, probably love to be home. But the other part of this is, would Scott Boras let him take a discount? Because what does Scott Boras do with all his clients? He makes them get in bidding wars. What do the Mariners do? What does Jerry DiPoto do? He'll say, here's our offer. We're not going to deviate much. We're not getting in a bidding war. You can either take it or leave it. So does that feel like the type of guy that the Mariners would sign, combined with the fact that he walks a ton of guys?
Well, Scott Boras doesn't get to make the final decision on where Blake Snell signs. Blake Snell gets to make that decision. So I think I'm thinking more that Blake Snell's need to go home will override Scott Boras's need to get the most money possible for his client. It is realistic that Blake Snell just wants the most money, and credit to him, he's earned it. He has pitched incredibly well this season. Here's a fun fact, Lyle. Did you know that if Blake Snell wins the Cy Young this year, he'll have twice as many Cy Youngs as All-Star game appearances?
That's crazy. That really is crazy.
Yeah. You can't find many people in baseball history that have that. That's a pretty complicated stat to look up, but it's pretty bizarre for Blake Snell. Regardless, he would bring a very high-end, high upside guy to your rotation with high-end stuff. And still at 30, he's thrown as hard as ever. His off-speed stuff is really as good as it gets in baseball, especially his curveball, one of the best off-speed pitches in baseball. My one slight downside with Blake Snell, Lyle, he doesn't know what WRC plus is. Kind of a red flag.
Maybe we can teach him if we ever had him on the podcast.
Seema, here's how I think interviewing Blake Snell would be. He could be a super cool dude, never met him before, but he's in the Cody Bellinger tier of always looking stoned.
Well, he is from Seattle.
Yeah, it fits right in.
Here's my other question too about Blake Snell. His career has been very up and down. So do you trust a guy like that to be in your rotation where year by year, you almost don't know which version of Blake Snell you're going to get? Because you'll have seasons like this year where he's one of the best pitchers in baseball and competing for a Cy Young. And then he has years where he doesn't really have his A-level stuff.
So here's how I look at this. His career ERA is 3.2. And the thing is, he's never truly bad. The two highest ERA marks of his career is a 4.2 ERA and a 4.29 ERA. That's not bad. That's just not Cy Young level. And it's up to the Mariners front office to decide if the effect of, hey, one year we might get a 2.9 from Blake Snell and another year we might get a 3.9 from Blake Snell. But if they still think the stuff holds up and the expected profiles are fine, and all this other stuff, if you go look at his expected numbers, like his expected ERA and such, it doesn't vary all that much from year to year. For example, his expected ERA in his first Cy Young campaign in 2018, and then a year later in 2019, when he had his highest ERA of his career at 4.29, the expected ERAs are almost identical. So sometimes run scoring is a little bit fluky and a little bit dumb lucky, and that's up to the Mariners to decide, hey, I think that luck will iron out and he'll be a good pitcher for us.
And if he pitched that well in Tampa and his expected numbers hold up, which much like WRC plus are not ballpark dependent, then Seattle could be a great place for him. We know how great Seattle treats pitchers. Could only help his ERA here, we would assume, right?
Yeah, I think so. And that's, I think, another big pitch to free agent pitchers. Blake Snell's not the only guy I think the Mariners will attempt to talk to, especially in the pitching market. You can never have enough pitching. If you have an opportunity to get a great pitcher to come in here, I don't think the Mariners should hesitate. They've already convinced, again, Luis Castillo, a blue chip guy, to sign an extension here. They convinced Robbie Ray to come out to the Pacific Northwest to sign a long-term deal after he won a Cy Young. I don't think it's really all that unrealistic for the top-of-the-line starters to just to come to Seattle and sign. If you pay them a fair amount of money, I think there's a lot of incentive for those guys to come pitch in T-Mobile Park just because it's such a great pitcher's park.